Hi guys, this is Jan for Chess24 and we're going to take a look at the game Grischuk against Caruana. Always a fun encounter played in the 6th round of the FIDE Grand Prix, where Caruana has looked in great shape so far. He's leading the pack with 3.5 out of 5, while Alexander Grischuk is on 50% before this game. But should he win it, he'd catch up with Fabiano Caruana, so it's still very close together. And let's go straight to the game. Grischuk starts with one knight f3, Caruana knight f6 and d4. I thought his one knight f3 might have been with the intention to go c4 here to play one of these anti-Grunfeld lines against one of Caruana's favorite openings, the Grunfeld. But looks like Grischuk doesn't seem to mind the Grunfeld that much, and that Caruana doesn't seem to feel like it for this game. I'm going to go d5 as other main weapon, the classical Queen's Gambit, c4, e6, knight c3 and bishop e7. We've seen Caruana play the trendy bishop b4 earlier in this tournament against MVL. He won that game, but today he decides to go back to his main weapon. The Queen's Gambit declined. Bishop e7, and Grischuk has a strange idea up his sleeve. Not his next move. His next move is quite natural. The move bishop g5. It's one of the two main moves here, together with bishop f4. But normally you see one of the two, but not both of them. And Grischuk does exactly that. He goes bishop g5, h6 is the main reply, questioning this bishop, and now he plays bishop f4, which has been played a bit, but it's very much a sideline. Bishop h4 is what everybody does here. Bishop takes f6, used to be popular as well. But Grischuk goes bishop f4, which at first sight looks strange. Why would he prefer this pawn on h6 instead of on h7? Because obviously you could just go bishop f4 immediately. This is the trendy line after castle, e3, knight bd7. White has been trying all sorts of things. Currently the fashion is the move c5. Mamedyarov once played g4 in this position against Vishy Anand, and it looks like Grischuk took note of that game and is trying to do something similar with the pawn on h6. We'll get to that in a minute. So he goes bishop f4, castles e3. Caruana was surprised by bishop f4, which you hardly ever see, and he took a lot of time here, but he finally decided to go knight bd7, just as in the main line. Nevertheless, I think with the pawn on h6 you also make a good case for c5, which used to be the other main line with the pawn on h7. It's a bit out of fashion there, but with the pawn on h6 controlling the g5 square, this looks like quite a playable move to me as well. But knight d7 was played, and here Grischuk unleashed the move g2, g4, which, well, I keep being surprised by every time they play it in some quiet Queen's Gambit position, but we've seen a lot of those by now, and I guess I should stop being surprised. Grischuk himself earlier played bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, castle e3, b6 and g4 against Peter Leko. Went on to win that game, even though g4 here is probably a bit dubious as well, as Grischuk himself mentioned in his notes. And Caruana is also on team g2, g4. We've seen him play it in a slightly different situation earlier in this tournament against Yevgeny Tomaszewski. Here, this is one of the g4s I understand and even like. After bishop e7, g4, the pawn can't be taken and wants to move up the board to claim some space. Caruana went on to win a nice game. But in Grischuk's version after castles and with the pawn on h6, I'm not so sure about it. The point, as usual, is that knight takes g4 runs into rook g1, and here, if the knight retreats, white has an option. Bishop takes h6, which is quite good for white, so you don't want to take that pawn. But you don't have to either. And with the pawn on h6, g5 is not that much of a threat next move, and black seems to me to be well positioned to get counterplay in the center. Caruana played dc4, which is a very sensible move. I'm also curious, why not c5 here, which also looks very logical. This is a move black always wants to play next after knight bd7. And yeah, I don't have Grischuk's analysis. I'm not sure what he was up to here. I couldn't find anything that looked good for white. For example, g5, I thought this might be the idea. Knight g5, but then after queen b6, my computer claims a pretty serious edge for black already, and I can believe it. The white king is in the center, and his position is a bit under fire, and it doesn't look like white is in time to generate an attack on the king side. So it would be interesting to see what Grischuk had prepared here, but Caruana wasn't eager to find out. He took a lot of time and went for the move dc4, which is also very sensible. He's clearing this d5 square for his knight ahead of time before that knight gets hit. bishop takes d4, knight to b6. Once again, c5 was an option, but knight b6 is very sensible. Makes the position a bit easier to play, which is also a consideration if you're surprised by your opponent's opening. b3, fd5, knight vacates this f6 square before g5 is coming and gains a tempo because the bishop has to go back, bishop g3. And now that the immediate, well, not assault, but the immediate ideas are parried, Caruana moves on to opening the position in the center with c5. So very strong logical reaction to this surprise by Fabiano Caruana, and I think he got a perfectly decent position. I wouldn't say he's better here, but I think, yeah, his position might already be a bit easier to play, and Grischuk wasn't that happy. Grischuk went knight e5. The computer insists on short castles here, but that's a move that's not really in the spirit of having your pawn on g4. You might have to do it sooner or later to coordinate the forces, but it would be a bit of an admission that things have gone well. So knight e5 was played, and Caruana making simple logical moves. cd4, queen takes d4, ed4 would just be too much. You can't give yourself an isolated pawn together with this g4 weakness when you can't really hide your king anymore, and black would just be better here. So queen takes d4 is a stronger move. Knight takes c3 and b takes c3. Queen c3 keeps the pawn structure intact but loses time, and after knight d5 I think black is already a bit better because white has some problems on this diagonal and a nasty check is coming. So bc3 is weakening the pawn structure. On the other hand, white is reinforcing his queen's position on d4, is hoping for queen takes d4, when after c takes d4, all of a sudden he would have a very pleasant pawn structure and a slightly better ending. But of course, Caruana does not do him that favor and goes knight d5. One of these great masters of the past, I'm not sure if it was Tarash or one of those guys, said that a knight on b6 is always misplaced anyway. Not sure it always is, but here d5 is certainly a better square for it. And Caruana now logically avoids the exchange of queens because white has his king still in the center and has some weaknesses. King has to leave the center, and now Grischuk castles, nothing better to do. Looks funny with the pawn on g4, but the number one priority here was to connect the rooks, and black is not really in a position to exploit the weakening of the white king just yet. But Caruana doesn't need to. He's playing queen to a5, attacks c3 and prepares rook to d8. Rook ac1, not sure that was necessary. You could make a case for c4 here, trying to push this knight away. And I believe the position is more or less equal. Still 6, rook fd1, rook d8, queen f4 for example. And white should be alright actually. But so is black. Probably the same idea as in the game. Bishop d7, playing bishop e8 would come. So queen a5, rook ac1 was played, and Caruana goes rook to d8. Not only hinting at some knight jumps, but also preparing this typical bishop d7, bishop e8 maneuver. Bishop goes rook fd1, and bishop d7 played. This is a little move and very logical. It's always the main problem black has in almost all these queen's gambit client positions, to include this passive bishop from c8 in the game. But still, bishop d7 required quite some calculation. First of all, it's giving up a pawn on d5, which Grischuk actually takes, but I don't think that was a good decision after bishop d5. Grischuk had first intended to go bishop d5, ed, knight d7, rook d7, and now c4 to exploit this pin, but black is in time to just go rook a8, fortify his d5 pawn. Here with his active pieces, everything developed, black would even be slightly better. So I believe Grischuk should have bailed out here, and I think he was trying to. He wasn't happy with the results of the opening. I believe the way to do this was to take on d7, rook takes, and now change the queens with queen to a4. Because yeah, once the queens are off the board, the weakening of the white king doesn't matter so much anymore. After queen a4, bishop a4, rook back to d8, I believe the endgame is about equal. White has the two bishops, which is always nice, but white also has these weaknesses on the queen side, and those two things more or less compensate each other. One very plausible line, for example, would be c4, knight to b4, bishop to b3, knight to d3, rook b1, knight to c5, bishop to c2. And this position is equal. The two bishops fully compensate for the slight weakening of the of the queenside. So I think Grischuk should have gone for that ending. Instead he chooses an ending, which first sight looks much better. He has an extra pawn, but I believe this was, yeah, a mistake. And I'm not sure why Grischuk went for this. Maybe he disliked his position so much that he thought this was his chance. But if we look at this after the logical move bishop e6, yes, white is a pawn up, but everything else works in black's favor. First of all, white has 3 weaknesses. 4 if we add his slightly shaky king's position, and black doesn't really have any. He has only 2 compact pawn islands, and most importantly he has the very strong bishop pair in this position, which can attack the black weakness. Keep confusing black and white. The white weaknesses, and there's no way white is gonna manage to keep his queen side together. So long story short, even though white is a pawn up, he is fighting for a draw in this endgame and is seriously worse, which could have been the outcome Grischuk was hoping for when he went g4. Rook e5 was played, bishop e3, just a little teasing. This rook is asked where it wants to go. Rook c2, rook d1 check could come. So Grischuk did not like that. Instead he went rook a1, defending the a2 pawn. And b6. Caruana keeps making simple, strong moves, a sign of good form. Nothing too flashy, but he's just slowly improving his position, and he has a series here. Grischuk plays c4, which, yeah, pretty much returns the pawn because he's not going to be able to maintain this pawn on c4 for much longer. The white position wasn't good anyway. You were going to lose this guy sooner or later after rook c8, so you can't criticize c4 too much. I think in view of the option black has in 2 moves that white maybe should on h3 to at least stabilize this g4 pawn. g4 was played, f6, rook to b3, kick bishop out, bishop f8 back, and knight to c6, rook dc8, knight d4, almost less forced, and now black has pretty tempting choice. He's going to win his pawn back and he can choose which one to take. Caruana decides to take on c4. I'm slightly surprised by that decision. Bishop takes g4 looks very strong, leaving white with these weaknesses he had on the queen side. And yeah, trying to attack those later while restoring material equality and the 3-3 situation on the king side. I believe this would have been even more unpleasant for Grischuk than what happened in the game. But Caruana instead prefers to build this 2 versus 1 majority on the queen side ASAP. Bishop c4, rook b1 back, bishop to d5, a4, very logical. He's trying to get rid of his a2 weakness and exchange some material along the way. Grischuk starts fighting back, but his position is a grim fight for a draw here. And this fact is not going to change anytime soon. Rook c4, a5, bishop c5, takes. So the material has been further reduced, but white is still not out of the woods. His king is shaky, black has a passed pawn, which will become a big factor, and black has the very nice 2 bishops, especially the unopposed light squared one, will keep giving white trouble. h3, bishop e4, rook d1. Here an interesting decision by Caruana. I think a good decision, but I'm not sure I would have come up with it. He just goes bishop takes e4, returns the 2 bishops, exchanges for a knight, and hopes to clarify the position and clear the way for his b pawn to march up the board. Second point is that rook takes d4 doesn't work here. Of rook c1 and checkmate. So white has to go d4, creating a pawn of his own, but that one is much easier to control. The black king is closer to it, the black pieces are more active than the black b pawn. So b5 is coming, and this pawn pretty much just wants to march up the board. Now the problem white has, his bishop is not as strong as the black bishop, for example, doesn't have access to the e5 square where it could control this guy. b5, king h2, just removing the king from the back rank where it was always in danger of getting mated. b4, d5, of course, Grischuk tries to mobilize his own pawn as well. Bishop c2, and rook to a1. I'm not sure about rook a1. I believe rook d2 might have been stronger, but that's a move that is very hard to make in mutual time trouble. Both players were seriously short on time here. One line that would scare away from it, for example, is b3, d6, b2, d7, b1 queen, d8 queen, king to h7. And from afar you see that white no longer has any checks. His king is still shaky. Bishop e4 and queen h1 check is a viable plan. So you might reject this variation, but here white is in time to save the draw with rook g7, bishop e4, and rook takes g7, a very important little resource, king g7, queen e7, and it would all end in a perpetual. However, with a few seconds on the clock, yeah, no surprise, Grischuk rejected this, and he plays more naturally. He's activating his rook and wants to put it behind the passed pawn. e3, rook a8, king h7. Another time move. Grischuk at the press conference pointed out that king f7 was better, just centralizing the king, bring it closer to this pawn. But yeah, king h7 is a typical time trouble reaction. I'm not going to be checked there. My king is safe. The battle continues. The status quo is still the same. Black is better. It's not clear if he's winning or if white can defend, and the assessment is going to stay there. Sometimes, yeah, shift a bit more into one or the other direction. But it's always a white fight for a draw, where sometimes it looks like he's going to get it and sometimes it looks like he doesn't. Might sound stranger, he's still so much worse here, but all these factors, the black b pawn being stronger than the d pawn and his bishop being more passive, are still very much in place even after king h7. d6, rook d1, once again hinting at bishop e4. The king has to come out of his cage, king g2 to d3. He's not in a hurry because it turns out white doesn't have any useful moves. For example, computer even gives king h2 here as an option. Grischuk goes rook b6. By now both players had made the time control and had new time to think. Caruana decides to probe a bit, change plans to trying to checkmate, putting the bishop on f3. Of course, it is stopped with 4, and Caruana plays another interesting, I think, good move, the move a5, trying to create a second front or a second target. He has this one strength, his pawn on b3, but it looks like that pawn alone is not going to be enough to win the game. So he's trying to provoke some weaknesses on the white king side and clear some inroads for his king. Grischuk went g5. You could also make a case for g8. I'm not sure which one was better. Both leave white worse, but with chances to defend. g5 was played, king to g6, and now we see the black king now has a path to come to help his forces. Bishop h4, not a pretty move to make, but it's directed at trying to stop the black king by putting pressure on this f6 pawn. King 5, gf, gf. And we play rook b5 check with another interesting choice for black. King takes f4 was not played. That's probably the worst of the choices because after bishop f6, black cannot take on d6 due to bishop e5 check. King e6 was interesting, trying to control this d6 pawn and capture it in due time, maintaining some advantage. But Caruana plays for the attack. He goes king to e4, which is quite dangerous. The white king doesn't have that much space around it. Bishop takes f6, rook takes d6, so white loses his passed d pawn, has a passed f pawn, but that doesn't look very scary yet, while black's main trump is still on the board, and black, yeah, keeps, I'm not sure if making progress, but keeps practicing winning chances at least. Bishop e5, rook d3, once again boxing in the white king. Rook d4 check, king f5. And Grischuk goes rook b5 back. You could make a case for h4 here. An ugly looking move, but stopping black from going h4, which happens in the game and cramps the white king even further. Rook b5, h4, and we already see there's a bit of a net around the white king. Can't feel too comfortable. Bishop h8. Grischuk is willing to part ways with his f-pawn, just so his bishop gains some influence along this diagonal as well as a defender. In general, it has to be said that I don't know if both sides always found the best moves, but Grischuk keeps defending very, very well here, showing how strong he is, and he doesn't make it easy at all for Caruana. But Caruana also keeps finding ways to apply pressure. He goes, once again, king e4, ignoring this f-pawn, which now advances, but that allows black to make further progress. f5, king e3. Very brave, but very strong move. trying to, just get much closer to the white king. Bishop f3 check is now a threat. That king f2 is no longer possible. And it's not easy to defend. Black has to give a check. White has to give a check to avoid, to stop bishop f3 check, rook e5. Now the king moves to f4. And he keeps making a bit of progress. Rook d2 check will come. Rook b5, rook d2, here we go. The king has to retreat to the back rank, king g1, king g3. Now, not only playing mates on the back rank, but also go after the h3 pawn. Still, Grischuk keeps being tough, goes rook b4, and there's still no direct wins for black available. For example, if you move this bishop to f3, there is still bishop e5 check, stopping rook d1 check, and white is right. So Caruana goes for bishop c2 instead, threatening rook d1 checkmate once again, and forcing white. Why can't I tell white and black apart today? Bishop e5, to go bishop e5 when black king takes on h3, so finally the pawn up. But the battle is still not over. White has some counterplay with his f-pawn, and it's gonna be very, very close if he will manage to hold this or not. f6, here he comes. Rook g2 check, f1. And here Caruana misses one chance, which required very, very accurate calculation. It's not like the players missed the option, but there were some finishing touches here that could have won him the game, with bishop d3 check, king e1, rook e2 check, king d1, rook takes e5. So far so good, but it ain't over yet. Rook b3 wins the piece back because of the pin and because of the f-pawn still being alive. But it turns out that black is in time here by one tempo to win this rook ending that ensues. King g2, rook takes d3, h3, and the black passed pawn is much stronger than the white passed pawn because it has the support of his king. The crucial line is rook d8, logical to put the rook behind h2, rook g8 check, f2, the only winning move, and black is just in time. Because after rook h8, there is rook e1 check, d2, h1, queen, rook takes, and this pawn is not gonna queen f7, rook h8, and black wins. So that was the most clear-cut chance. Caruana had to finish the game, but both players wrongly thought this line was going to draw. So Caruana keeps probing, and so he goes rook to g5, taking the bishop, bishop d4, king h2, now planning to advance this pawn, even if it means putting his king into the corner on h1. That's where it's going to end up. Bishop c6, h3, bishop c7. Grischuk rightly transfers the bishop back to the diagonal. King h1, not an ideal location, but there's still two passed pawns that are running up the board. Rook h4, threatening checkmate, so black has no time to push the b-pawn. Instead he has to go bishop d3, king f2, rook g2, chasing the white king away. King e3, b2. And here it looks like this pawn can't be stopped, it's queening. But we see Grischuk's prowess as a defender. He's seen this coming, and he saw he has a resource here with rook b4, when b1 queen does not only not win, but would in fact probably lose the game after takes and f7, because the white f-pawn cannot be stopped from queening. Very cunning defensive resource there by Grischuk, and Caruana had to go back, stop the f-pawn, go bishop g6, but he still has both his pawns in play, and the pawns won't be captured so easily. Bishop e5, once again the same idea, you can't queen because in the end f7 wins for white. h2, now the guy makes it to the second rank, and white is not in time to take on b2 because it would be met by king g1, and this guy queens. Still, resources aren't exhausted. Grischuk now gives up his f-pawn to get rid of the enemy b-pawn. f7, bishop f7, and bishop takes b2. Only one black pawn left, and it seems like this position should be very close to a draw, if not drawn. But, well, first of all, white right now threatening bishop e5 and bishop takes h2. And black is not in time to go g1 and queen his pawn, because once again there is bishop e5. H1 queen would be a bit of a mistake because of rook b1 checkmate. Very rare mating construction. So Caruana had to prevent bishop e5, rook g5, controlling this square. King f2, good move, keeping the black king locked in. Bishop to d5. And here is where Grischuk misses his one very clear-cut chance to make a draw. He had a very nice resource, the move bishop e5 anyway. Point is, not only does this take this diagonal under control and maybe threaten bishop h2 if it's needed, it stops black from making any progress because of the looming b1. Can't take it, since rook b1 would be checkmate. And it's very hard to free the king from the now, rook g2 for check, for example, king e3. And once again, rook b1 is coming, so you can't go king g1. And it looks like no progress can be made here for black. Looks like it's just a draw. Rook h4 is also in the air. Not much to do. So Grischuk missed this chance to conclude the game peacefully. Went with d4. And now, once again, black has chances. It goes rook g2 check. And king f1 was played, which further complicates white's task. King e1 might have been better, going to a light square, because it would not have allowed the idea we're going to see in the game with rook c2 and bishop c4 check, which effectively stops the threat of bishop e5. And here, after king e1, once again bishop e5 is a threat, and it doesn't look so easy for black to make any progress. So Grischuk went king f1, and after rook c2, it turns out it's not so easy to defend against this idea with bishop c4 check, because bishop e5 is no longer an option. Here, bishop e5, bishop c4, king e1, rook e2 would lead to a winning position for black after rook takes e5. So it seems like white is in big trouble here, but he still has a solution, a study-like solution. Keep his bishop on this diagonal, bishop a7 for example, and after bishop c4 check to just take it. Rook takes c4, rook takes c4, play king f2 here, and it turns out this is a fortress and black can't make any progress, which is amazing. I'm not sure I've seen this fortress before, but it doesn't look like there's anything to do. I didn't come up with this myself. All credit goes to the Indian world-class player, Grandmaster Pantalya Harikrishna, who mentioned this on Twitter. And yeah, no matter what you try, it doesn't look like black anywhere. c2 check, white just put it on g3 or f3. As long as this bishop controls this diagonal, the black king is not going to get out. Rook g2, king f3. And it also seems impossible to chase this bishop off the diagonal. There's too many squares on it. Whatever, rook d7, bishop d4. Keep it here. And it seems like this position is just a draw. So that's an interesting discovery, at least for me, that you could hold the game even like this after all what happened. It's set in the game after rook b6, bishop c4 check. Now Caruana did reach a winning position and Grischuk resigned here, which might look premature, but there's really not much to do for it. Not, for example, king e1 is forced. But, well, there's many ways to win already. King g2, just to queen this pawn. There's not really a defense. For example, rook g6, king f3, h6, h1, queen. And game over. So, yeah, tough fight between both these guys. Grischuk fighting for a draw. From early on, his opening experiment backfired in this game, the move g4. Caruana reacted strongly. Grischuk couldn't quite remember his analysis. And out of the opening, he said he was feeling that he was fighting for a draw. And yeah, he didn't manage to hold it. I don't think his position was too bad, probably, yeah. After bishop d7 was a key moment, for example, this option looked solid to me. But instead, the thing they got was a bit of a display of the power of the two bishops. And yeah, the problem with having pawn weaknesses. And Caruana, he's in shape, played a good game, managed to apply so much pressure that Grischuk cracked in the end. And in the standing, that means that Fabiano Caruana, let's see if I can find the standings today, takes the sole lead with, well, he already had the sole lead, but keeps it with 4.5 out of 6. Are they here? It's not pretty, but that kind of here. Here we go. Caruana 4.5 out of 6, followed by Svidler and Karjakin with 4 out of 6. Karjakin all of a sudden in contention for one of the 2 qualifier spots for the candidates tournament, where Caruana looks like a lock and the other guys fighting for it are Nakamura, Tomaszewski and Karjakin. Well, Grischuk not having a great tournament, on -1 now, but I would never count him out. It's gonna stay exciting. Thanks for watching this very complicated game, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.